Hello, everyone. This is Nathan Allen from Poets and Quants. I'm a staff reporter at Poets and Quants, and I'm also the editor of our Entrepreneurship Rankings project, which just came out this morning. It's our second annual one. So if you want to go check that out, it's up on our main page at poetsandquants.com. Welcome to the Entrepreneurship Backstage event. I'm here to lead an alumni panel with 3 panelists so far. We have one more who could be joining us afterwards, but we had to keep on schedule, so we're going to go ahead and get going. And if that person joins in, we'll do the intro then. But either way, I'm super excited. This is a very valuable webinar panel to do, just because you're going to get to learn from the student experience now as alumni, launching a business either in business school or soon after, or using the business degree, the MBA, to help scale a startup that they've already started on. So I'm going to quit talking now. I'm going to do a brief intro to our 3 panelists right now, and then we'll let them talk, because that's where the value is going to be. So first of all, I want to introduce Natalie Feng, who went to the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. She has a startup now called Nochi Studios. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong once we get going. Welcome, Natalie. And then we have Eric Van Watson, who went to the University of California in San Diego for his MBA. He's running a company called EpiTracker. Welcome, Eric. And then we've got Savitha Sridharan from Babson, who started a company called Aurora Global, and I'm sure I butchered that. Welcome, Savitha. So Savitha, let's just go ahead and start with you, since I probably blew that up. You can correct me on that.
Almost right, yeah.
Okay, almost got it. So Savitha, why don't you just give us a brief background about who you are? So you don't need to talk too much about the actual business yet. We'll get to that. But just as far back as you want to go, who you are, give us a little bit of background context of where you're from, where you did your undergrad, and how you ended up at Babson.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on this webinar. I think it's an honor to be representing Babson at your event. So I grew up in India and graduated from the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, as an electrical engineer back in 2001. I've been very passionate about international development as well as engineering all along. So I pursued a career in electrical engineering, and then worked as a chip designer for a while. And then came to the US, worked again, got an MS from NC State University, and then went into the network processor division and again worked in chip design and modeling, performance modeling for a while. At some point, I just wanted to create, I was living in a very male-dominated sector all this while. In my engineering, we were 2 girls in a class of 108, and that's how I've been all along. So I wanted to provide more employment opportunities for women in the engineering sector. And given that in mind and focus on international development, clean energy seemed like a good focus, and hence I started Aurora Global to provide clean energy solutions to developing countries where there's no access to electricity.
Great, thanks. And we're going to talk a little bit more about your background and what your business is doing, but thanks for that context. Eric, we're going to move to you next. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Savitha, very cool. Very cool. So my name is Eric. I'm a military physician by training, spent 24 years in the Navy, background in orthopedic surgery, aerospace medicine. I actually went to Rady, UCSD, graduated in 2010. I used my newly minted MBA skills to go out and start a few companies. And so three to date. The first was a medical device company called Expand Ortho, which was acquired last year. And then EpiTracker, which is a drug development platform, an IP generating machine. And then the one I'll talk about today, which is Serafina Therapeutics, which is a health and wellness company. Nice to meet everyone.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And Natalie, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so I pretty much grew up in the Midwest all my life, been bouncing around several states here. I did my undergrad at Notre Dame, studied finance and Japanese, was really interested in like working with overseas partners, and social impact was like a really big thing for me as well. So after undergrad, I actually went to work at Target in their global sourcing area. And so I worked with in their private label and worked with a lot of partners overseas. And it was really cool to be able to see the impact from the supply chain side and being able to spur economies in countries that are developing. After that, I decided to move to another brand, worked in luxury goods for a little bit, and then decided I wanted to do more on the social impact side. Like I was seeing stuff that was happening on development and product, but wanted to get closer to the consumer, which is sort of related to like why I love entrepreneurship, is like being close to the consumer. And so I decided to get my MBA at Ross. And at Ross, I didn't think I would go for entrepreneurship. So I was thinking I'd do marketing, but eventually just pivoted and got the entrepreneurial bug and decided like, hey, I learned a lot in the program and decided to work on my startup full time after graduation. So just graduated this past May and now I'm working on Nochi.
Great, thanks. It's good to have a fellow Midwesterner here as somebody who also grew up in the Midwest. So Eric, we'll start this next question with you. You know, I think one of the things that people wonder is, am I an entrepreneur? Can I be an entrepreneur? So Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? When did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur or try entrepreneurship? Did it run in your family, or is it something that just kind of came to you?
Yeah, I think it's always been in my genes, I think. And so my mom tells me when I was like 6, I would escape from the house and go try to sell things to the neighbors. And so I've always been had an entrepreneurial mindset. But there's one thing that stands out that kind of gave me the confidence to really, start companies, because it takes a lot of grit. And that was, I was actually the physician for the West Coast Marine Corps and Navy. So I was taking care of, or helping to take care of 16,000, Marines and sailors over the West Coast. And the 2-star general called me in his office and he said, "Doc, we're going to war. Take care of our Marines and sailors and don't jack it up." He didn't actually say don't jack it up, but, and we did. Meaning, we were able to put the medical system in place in the most austere of environments, in this case, Afghanistan, and successfully, treat people and provide a very high level of care. So I think even to this date, that was the most entrepreneurial thing I've ever done. So now, when there's a problem with one of our companies, which there always is something that comes up, I think to myself, no one's dying, no one's getting shot at, and we will find a way to adapt and overcome.
Great, thank you for that. Natalie, how about you? Was there a point where you knew you wanted to become an entrepreneur?
So I have family who have run businesses, and I think I never really put 2 and 2 together thinking that would impact me to be an entrepreneur. But similarly, like when I was younger, I would go selling things in the neighborhood too. So there's like that salesman aspect, being involved in the community. But I think, again, the turning point for me in particular was going to Ross and realizing I can combine all my passions and really go after entrepreneurship. Like corporate life for me wasn't quite doing it. Like, sure, I got to see a little exciting piece of the whole picture, but it wasn't really as energizing to be able to see a whole picture as an entrepreneur and really get your hands involved in the business. So I think, yeah, the big turning point for me was through the MBA program and realizing that there's more can be done and getting the experience to learn and work with peers on a plan was really exciting.
Great. We'll definitely chat more about that in a little bit. Savitha, how about you? What was your path to entrepreneurship?
I was never going to do an MBA or entrepreneurship about 2 or 3 years before I actually did it. I was totally against doing an MBA and all of that stuff. But then I took a break and realized that I wanted to create something different and creative. And I thought that international development was great. And I saw that there's a need and an opportunity, but going the nonprofit and the grants and donation kind of route was not a sustainable method. So I was really looking to create something sustainable in international development. And when I went to Babson College and saw the variety of entrepreneurship of all kinds, and how encouraging it was for women entrepreneurs, I knew that was exactly what I wanted to do.
Great, thanks. And it looks like we just had our next panelist join. So I'll just use this time to give a disclaimer that I do have a dog in my house, and I just realized that the stairs are right there. So if he comes running down the stairs, I apologize ahead of time. Hopefully he doesn't bark. I'll put it on mute if he does. Hey, Ankit, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Great, we're great. Welcome to the panel. So we just got started, so I'll give you an opportunity to answer the first couple of questions that our other panelists answered. So first, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background? We'll just combine them both into one question. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, where you did your undergrad, where you went to earn your MBA, and when did you realize that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Ankit Mehra, based out of Delhi, India. I did my undergrad from IIT Kanpur in mechanical engineering and worked in the financial services industry after my graduation. I worked at Capital One in the US for 6 years from 2007 till 2013. So joined financial services at the best time, which was just before the onset of the Great Recession, and worked for 6 years in a firm in the US. In early 2013 is when I decided to kind of move out of Capital One and move back to India to pursue my dream of starting something. And that was really in the sports sector. I wanted to start something in the sports sector. So I decided to take a detour from the US, move to Europe, pursue an MBA in Europe from IESE Business School, really to get some experience in the sports sector and get some exposure in that sector. And that was my entry into the business school regime. It just so happened that when I entered IESE Business School, I had a change of track, and I started looking at Gandhan, which is in the business of education financing, rather than looking at sports sector. And here I am working on Gandhan for the last 5 years.
Great, thanks. And just as I said that, the big dog came down the steps behind me.
Yes.
So let's talk about your companies then. So this will be your main question prompt to talk about your companies, what you're trying to solve. So Natalie, we'll start with you this time. Share any background about your company. How old is it? How many employees do you have? And what problem are you trying to solve?
Yeah, so No Choose Esa Studio, and we're developing interactive games, specifically interactive manga, anime-style mobile app games for female players. And we have an industry-unique focus where we're really focusing on strong female characters and incorporating hypercurrent, really compelling storylines. So the problem that we're trying to solve is that most of these games that are available for females today, especially in the romance genre, they're normally ported from Asia, and this leads to several issues, including cultural mistranslations or like language mistranslations. But the biggest issue is the female characters. Usually people complain about them being steamrolled by the male leads, things like that. So being a user myself, that really made me passionate about solving this need and trying to create a company that's US-centric focused. And our team is female-based. We're female creatives creating content that females want. So we have 6 people on the team, but we work with a lot of partners throughout Michigan, also internationally as well.
Super cool. Great. Ankit, let's go ahead and just move to you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your company, how old it is, what problem you're trying to solve, anything else you want to share about it?
All right. So I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Gyandhan. It's made of two words, which mean Gyan and Dhan, which basically translates to knowledge is wealth. And we are in the business of expanding and equalizing access to higher education. So the problem we are trying to solve is how do we enable a student to access financing to pursue his or her higher education, whether it be in India or abroad, irrespective of their educational background and irrespective of their financial background, more importantly. Because traditionally in India, access to financing is limited by your financial background in terms of how strong your co-applicant is, how strong your parents are, and so on and so forth. So it's really making it equitable, wherein a smart student from a relatively not that well-off background could still access financing and kind of break out of that socioeconomic structure. We've been in operations for the last 5 years. I started Gyandhan right after completing my MBA. And in the last 5 years, we've now enabled financing for almost $150 million of loans through our platform.
Great, thanks. Savitha, we'll move to you next, those few questions.
Sure. So I started Aurora Global when I was an MBA student at Babson. I actually applied to the MBA school with that as my application story and continued to work on it right from then. So that was back in 2014 that I started Aurora Global. What we have been doing, we are basically a social enterprise that builds sustainable communities, particularly in developing countries, using renewable energy as the vehicle of innovation. So the community where we work in India is severely affected by climate change, and a lot of income has been there's been no income from agriculture, so people are looking for alternate source of income. So I've basically set up a training and a production center where we have hired women, taught them electronics. Now they can produce solar products to light up their own community. We have about 220 women working with us right now, and we are beginning to scale up and create more innovative solutions with clean energy as we move forward.
Great, thanks. And then Eric, you've started a few companies, but you wanted to focus on one. So the one you wanted to start on, or you can open it up to a few, whatever you want, but some background on those companies.
Wow, I can do anything. So I'll talk about Serafina. So Serafina Therapeutics, as I mentioned, was a health and wellness company, and we're dedicated to advancing global health through discovery of essential fatty acids and micronutrients. And so we discovered that a molecule is potentially the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in 90 years. We published that in Nature Scientific Reports, +1 PNAS, and now we're converting that to a product. And so our first product is an essential fatty acid, and you look at www.fatty15.com. So we're calling it Fatty 15 to get people talking about it, that not all fats are bad for you. And in fact, some saturated fats may be good for you and may be essential for good health. And so check it out. We just started. You're one of the first to see. I think it went live like 2 weeks ago. And so we're a 2018 company. We're a spin out from EpiTracker. EpiTracker is the parent company that I mentioned that we started right after the MBA program. And it's really an intellectual property machine. And so in Serafina, we have really one employee where we take a very bootstrapped approach to all these things, to all of the companies. And we outsource a lot of specific deliverables. And so the problem we're trying to solve is interesting because traditional drug discovery is done usually by studying short-lived animals, flies, mice, worms, right? And so the pathophysiology of chronic diseases for short-lived animals is just not the same as humans and other big brain mammals. So we take large data sets that are population-based over 60 years, and we apply the multi-omics, which are metabolomics, genomics, lipidomics, and then that allows us to really discover these diamonds in the rough, or natural molecules and therapeutics that are essential for health, that treat different chronic diseases and improve our aging.
Super fascinating. I'm going to definitely check that out, especially the saturated fats part. And you can tell that Eric is truly bootstrapping by all the boxes he has in the background right there. That's some true.
I learned how to
really,
use a pallet jack. I'm really good if anyone needs that skill. So
really building the startup out of the home right there. So next, we'll move to Ankit. We'll ask you to start this question, so go ahead and be prepping for it. So why the MBA? And you all started to answer this, but I'm wondering if you can go into any more detail about why the MBA and then why the specific school that you chose. So I love that we have schools from not only global and in the United States, but all over the United States. We've got UCSD on the West Coast, we got Babson on the East Coast, and then we've got Michigan Ross right in the upper Midwest. So why the MBA and why the specific school you chose? Ankit, we'll start with you. Oh, looks like you're still on mute, Ankit.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So so as I said, I think I gave a brief overview in terms of I wanted to start something in the sports sector in India. And prior to moving back, I thought I would want to get some exposure in the sports sector. So that's really was one of the drivers in terms of trying to figure out which schools should I shortlist and how should I go about shortlisting the schools. And the reason why I wanted to, I was working in the US at that point in time. I'd been working in the US for the last 3 years. And one of the things that I figured out was I wanted a different experience. And by that, I mean, I wanted a more diverse experience, which is why I decided to move to Europe from US, because what appealed to me was when I was exploring schools was in Europe, I would have exposure to a lot more people from different experiences. Whereas my personal, I would say, bias at that point in time was in US, I would be exposed more to consultants and bankers from a few specific countries. And that's why I kind of looked at more European schools. And why did I choose ESA in particular was down to 3 or 4 specific reasons. As I was doing my research, one of the things I figured out was, hey, ESA is based out of Barcelona. And there were a few professors that I'd done my research on who were associated with either clubs or companies that were in the sports sector back then. That was number 1 reason. Number 2 reason why I picked ESA specifically was the fact that the ESA has this program wherein you can put in your resume and get some early feedback on your application. So I had done that, and I actually got to meet their admissions director in the US. That to me was one of the biggest deciding factors in terms of applying to ESA. As a matter of fact, that was the only school I applied to for my MBA applications. And there is no other school that I applied to. And the third and the fourth clinching factors were, the third was the mode of instruction, which was a completely case-based method, which is what I wanted to approach. And then the last was, again, prior to getting an eventual admission, we had a weekend wherein we could attend a sample class. And that's where I met a lot of my prospective future classmates. And that's where I could complete the cycle in terms of I met all the prospective candidates who were coming from different experiences. Someone who had worked in a German parliament, someone who was in the industry from pharmacy. And so getting people from different nationalities and from different backgrounds, someone working in the sushi industry in Japan, that was really where I felt that, hey, I'll get a lot more experience when I get into the sports sector or any other sector eventually.
Great. Thank you. Sveta, we'll move to you next. You mentioned, I think, in your intro that you never considered the MBA, and then you ended up not only in an MBA program, but in the Boston area in the United States. Tell us about what led you to the MBA and Babson specifically. Oh, I think you're still on mute as well.
Like I mentioned, I had no idea of an MBA or entrepreneurship. But then when I was a chip designer, I was also spending my time volunteering for nonprofits in India and trying to help with developmental projects. And I mean, I got involved in it, running marathons, raising funds, and I was seeing that there was an impact from that model. I mean, and I wanted to create a greater impact, and I started running more, and I was ultimately running ultra marathons to fundraise for projects. And then I realized that's really not a sustainable way of doing things. And I had to figure out a more sustainable way to scaling impact. And that's when I first looked at entrepreneurship. And when I went to Babson College, it had all the ecosystem that was required for entrepreneurship, great support system. What I loved most about it is the immense support for women entrepreneurs in terms of funding for an MBA, as well as the ecosystem around starting new enterprises. The Lewis Institute of Social Innovation is the program at Babson, which works with social enterprises. And they worked with me even before the, even through the application process, they were working with me. And as soon as I went in, I started working on my ideas. So they have been with me all along, not only through the MBA, but even after the MBA, and have supported me at every stage, including now. So I just feel that I've created a family for a lifetime with Babson, and it's a great school for entrepreneurs trying to try creative things in the industry.
Totally. Yeah, definitely known for entrepreneurship. Great. And then let's go ahead and move on to Eric. Eric, you were, so I'm going to twist this question a little bit for you. You were already pretty far into your career. You had a couple of decades, I think, in the military, it looked like. So why the Residential MBA program instead of an executive or online or part-time? And then UCSD, obviously you were already in the area, but why specifically the Rady School?
Yeah, Savita, ultra marathoner. That's incredible. That's awesome. Congratulations. So, you know, I have wanted to get an MBA for a very long time, and just with the military and with the MD, it's just very, you know, it's tough to do, right? And so I actually applied to all the MBA joint programs. And so I actually got into a few of those, and then I had the option to go through the military and get my school paid for and live in ice caves and in 128-degree weather and fly around in F-18s and do some cool stuff. So that was the right choice for me. I could never do a full-time day program just because I've got, you know, full-time job, military. And so I needed a school that was very supportive of military and of my work life, and also was very entrepreneurial. So, and I wanted to be in person. It was important for me to be in person. So I looked at a lot of different options, and you know, San Diego is a great place for the biotech community, right? We have a lot of pharma, a lot of biotech. So I knew I wanted to be in that area or someplace similar. So of all the schools that I looked at, you know, Rady, UCSD had the best entrepreneurial program, at least in my mind. And so they had a lab to market program, which basically means, you know, you take your ideas and you convert them to hopefully fruition, and that's part of your curriculum. So I feel like, you know, the outcome of that was very successful. Like I was able to put those tools that I gained in place to, you know, really launch my first company, which is Expand Ortho, which was later acquired. And so that was important to me. And then military, you know, it's just tough because you never know when you're going to deploy and things like that. So the Rady School, actually, I had to deploy in my last semester or quarter of the program. And so they actually sent me care packages, let me take one class by sat phone from Afghanistan. And they actually postponed graduation 2 weeks until I got back, which I'm forever grateful. So that was incredible. And lastly, the people in my class all had full-time jobs, right? And so one of the reasons I couldn't do an MBA program before is because no one offered a night class in the area. Everyone offered like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it's not like you can leave the military on Friday. And so I needed a night class. And when I started, there was a bunch of people like me, like you guys, who had, you know, full-time jobs by day, would take classes by night. And the really cool thing about that is you can learn by day and then you can apply all those concepts the next day. So that was equally important. So entrepreneurial program, supportive of the military, and just allowed me to have a full-time job.
Great, thanks. And super interesting about taking a class while in Afghanistan. That's an experience. All right, Natalie, how about you? Why the MBA and why Michigan Ross?
Yeah, I actually similarly wasn't really sure I needed an MBA or wanted an MBA since my undergrad degree was at Notre Dame for business. But I ended up jumping in, and specifically Ross was because of all the action-based learning that they have. Like I knew like financial modeling, I knew my accounting stuff. So I didn't feel like I needed that. But what drew me to Ross specifically is all their centers of institutes. Like they have the Sanger Leadership Center, they have their Zeller Entrepreneurship Center, and outside of the classroom, there's all these practice action-based scenarios that we can do. And one of the headliners, like when I was visiting the school, was the Leadership Crisis Challenge, where it's a 24-hour simulation where they throw you in as a C-suite member, and you're dealing with a huge crisis of like a company, and you actually have to present to a board, and they fly in all these people. So things like that, where I realized that in my normal career trajectory, I couldn't get that experience. Like, and if you did get that experience, it was happening that time, right? It's not like you can practice in a safe zone. So that really drew me to Ross, is because it was like a safe zone where I can practice leadership skills. Then there was entrepreneurship that I found out later once I got onto campus. There was all these programs that like you didn't have to take classes for. You can just attend all the workshops and do, they have something called the Michigan Business Challenge. So it's a huge pitch competition. And so being able to do that supplemented my class experience to really give me a well-rounded entrepreneurship type of education, because we're all like founders and we're going to be leading our company. So getting that leadership aspect plus the hands-on entrepreneurship piece, again, in that safe environment was really important to me.
Great, thanks. And so for the next round, this question, we'll start with Savitha. We'll go to you first. So, and we've already kind of talked about this, but I'm wondering if you all can go into any more detail or specifics about how your specific program really was essential to creating your business, either at the time or now or both. Savitha, how about you and Babson?
Sure. Like I mentioned, there's a clear path that you can take through Babson if you know that you are doing an MBA for entrepreneurship at Babson. There's tons of opportunity at Babson to start your idea from the back of a paper napkin to take it to a real business here. So there's something called as a rocket pitch, which is usually very early in the program, like 2 or 3 months after an MBA starts, and you can take your idea and pitch it to a few people, form your network among your own classmates. That is, if you're looking for fellow founders and things like that, then you can create a network within your own school. And then there's a program called the WIN Lab, or the Women Innovating Now, which is basically an accelerator program just for women entrepreneurs to take them from the idea stage to the launch stage in 4 months. So there are programs like that. Then there are programs through summer, which will help you to scale to the next stage. So basically, if you have an idea in mind, there's multiple options by which you can start building your business and keep taking it to the next level. There are also newer programs that are coming now, which takes businesses that have a revenue of 250K and grow it to $1 million. So there's an ecosystem that is well laid out that can be easily taken, specifically if you know that entrepreneurship is why you're doing an MBA for.
Great, thanks. Eric, we'll move to you next. How was the Rady School and then the entire UCSD ecosystem particularly helpful to you and your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, so some of the similar things to Savitha for sure, very much an entrepreneurial program. I call it the Rady card. And so San Diego is a very good place for the ability to reach out to entrepreneurs and for them to say, yes, I will meet with you. So basically, excuse me, I would, figure out who I wanted to reach out to San Diego. And I would say, I'm a Rady student and I would like to talk to you and please impart wisdom. And so I ended up having a lot of coffee with a lot of people. And so sometimes I think, wow, if I was still a student at Rady, you know how much I could get done? Because it wouldn't cost me anything. I could just use my Rady card. But after you graduate, then it actually costs money. So that was one thing that was really interesting. The other is, I was able to get a lot of wisdom and help in starting these companies through my professors. And one I want to call out, his name was Michael Berthelot. He taught corporate governance. And so I would bounce some of these ideas off of him. And, he was a prior CEO of a Fortune 500 company on the boards of multiple companies, including Fresh Del Monte. And so over time, he became a very good friend, and now he's CFO of both EpiTracker and Serafina. So I think, the answer is it's a combination of the classes, San Diego in general, to have this incredible network, using the Rady card, and then just having, professors that are willing and want to help.
Great, thanks. And that's something, for our readers and viewers, the Rady card, that's something that we hear about from a lot of schools like UCSD or Washington University or the University of Michigan, Ross, that might not be in the more traditional startup areas like the San Francisco Bay Area or New York City or Boston or some of the international places. But having that being kind of the big fish in the small pond can be very helpful for a lot of people, and it's something to consider when looking at different programs. So speaking of one of those places, Natalie, we'll move to you next. I know there's a lot going on in Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan in terms of the entrepreneurial climate. Tell us about some of the aspects that were more helpful for you going through Ross and U of M.
Yeah, definitely. What I really loved about my MBA experience was I felt like I got a really good 360 view, actually. So I was actually on 2 of the investment funds there. And so going through the investment process, and we actually made investments every year, we had portfolio companies, I was able to see the other side of the table. What are investors looking at? What's the screening process like? How deep do people go in the due diligence process? And being able to screen hundreds of deals every year with these investment funds helped me start getting an understanding of how to talk to investors and what are they looking at so that I can make my business be pitchable to other people. And so getting that viewpoint really helped with everything else that was going on in the Michigan ecosystem, including the Michigan Business Challenge, the pitch competition. So then I could practice what I learned and pitch to the investors in the Michigan ecosystem. But they also have a lot of grant programs, which is really helpful. And they have entrepreneurs in residences. So as you're going through these grant programs, you're working with the professors hand in hand, going over your business plan, your financial models to see is this sustainable? How should we go about the customer discovery process? So being able to fit all of that together, I felt made me super well-rounded. But actually, Nochi is currently part of the university's accelerator program. So I'm currently in the Decide Accelerator. So it even goes beyond the MBA program. And now we got pre-seed investment from the university to keep doing the work that we're doing. And being in that accelerator program, there's a lot of things happening in Ann Arbor. They're really trying to grow up the technology scene. And there's some really big companies there Duo Security, if anyone has to use it for work. And so they really help connect us with everyone in the Midwest and help us get contacts that we need or network and even grant funding too from time to time.
Great, thanks. Keith, we'll move to you next. Tell us about some of the more helpful aspects of the IESE program and Barcelona, which is also becoming a pretty hot spot for startups right now.
Sure. I'll focus more on the academic side of things from ESA to begin with. And now looking back, I think it becomes even more relevant for me. So the thing that I liked and it's really had a big impact on me is the way the course is structured in itself, in the sense that the first year is effectively a compulsory program you don't have any optional courses per se. The way it works well is you get exposure to every possible segment out there, whether it be decision analysis, analysis of business problems, or the more human resources aspect of it, like leadership, like figuring out your own personality and all that stuff. So that's really, useful. And then in the second year, it's pretty much you can tailor the course according to your own requirements. So what I ended up choosing was a lot of courses either on the PE VC side or on the entrepreneurship side. So I was working in a course wherein you are associated with a startup, you work with the startup for the entire semester on a particular project. That gives you an inside view in terms of what is it that the entrepreneur is really looking for or really cares about. Similarly, you have a course on entrepreneurship finance, wherein you get exposed to stuff like term sheets and how to approach investors, what are they looking for, and what matters to you from a financing standpoint for your startup. To something like PVC, where you're looking at it from a different angle. So those case studies and kind of exposure to different segments is really very, very helpful. And a couple of things that I'll definitely mention is one, the leadership courses and the courses on HR, and specifically there I'll touch upon the diversity that I mentioned earlier on at IESE, because coming from a financial services background, coming from Capital One, I think I had, and coming from an engineering background from IIT Kanpur, I had a mindset wherein I would think numbers and that's the only thing I would think about. But then being exposed to people from different walks of life really made me understand that a company is not just about numbers, but it's about people. And you need to understand the person more than numbers at times. While numbers matter at the end of the day for any startup, it really stems from understanding the people. And for me, from an entrepreneurship standpoint, the entire course very well rounded off with my final program that I opted for after the MBA was effectively over, which is a week-long intensive executive simulation program when you are essentially broken down into teams and you then compete on a particular business problem. You have a board you have to report to, you break up into teams and you are either a CEO or a COO or stuff like that. So you have that competition where you are pitched against other teams and you have the normal snafus that would happen in a company and you have to report to a board. So that was a very compressed worldview of how people in the external environment would react to you, how people in the internal environment, which is your own company, would react to your approaching problems from a different standpoint. And that really was the icing on the cake for me, frankly speaking. I've blogged about this earlier as well, but that executive simulation was really a very well-rounded, very good ending to my MBA and entry to Gandhar.
Great, thanks. I love that tidbit about the people over numbers. And I think that's something especially that maybe people who are thinking about the traditional MBA program wouldn't think too much about, because numbers can be so important to MBAs in the business mind. So that people over numbers was super fascinating. Thank you for that. Eric, we will move to you first on this next question. And it's, what advice do you have for people who might be considering the MBA, who want to use it as a platform to either start a company while in business school or a few years after business school?
Yeah, and so a couple things. So one, I'm biased, of course, but I feel like the MBA program is a really good way to leverage your starting a company, right? Because it's a relatively safe environment where you have the Rady card, you have professors that are willing to talk to you about these things. You can, quickly make mistakes and improve them immediately. And so it's, I think, a great environment to do what I call on-the-job training, right? So learn in the day, apply the next day, and grow your business. So that's the biggest. So reason for an MBA in my mind. And two, I think, one of the most important things for the MBA program, because there's a lot of different good schools, right, is choosing one that has the right tools for what you want to do, because every school has a different, bent to it, right? And so Rady was very entrepreneurial in the biotech and tech community for me, which was the right fit. But, if someone's into, just straight, finance, that may not be the best fit for them. So finding a school that has the right tools to provide you with what you feel is necessary to take that next step and start your company is extremely important, and it worked out for me.
Great, thanks. And the point about right tools, I think is specifically important to today. This event kind of revolves around the entrepreneurship ranking, which is a ton of work and it's a ton of data that goes into it. But those should just be used as a starting point. And the right fit and the right tools are what we really hope that MBA applicants are looking for. So use these as a starting point, check out the data, but then poke around on the school's websites, talk to people like Eric, Natalie, Savitha, Ankit about their specific experiences, get to really know the schools to see if they're the right fit for you. Natalie, we'll move to you next. What advice do you have for people who are considering the MBA as a way to launch a company?
Yeah, totally agree with Eric in terms of the MBA is definitely a safe zone. And so soaking up as much as possible you can during that time, connecting with professors who are have done great research or just are super great mentors to help your business too. I think the other thing that's really great about the MBA program is even though I'm working on Nochi right now, if God forbid it fails or something, everything that I've learned in the MBA program, in terms of processes, customer discovery, the tools that I should be using, I can easily use that again and start another business. I know how to look at pain points, market research, etc., building financial models. And so all these skills carry forward no matter what. And so I would say while you're in the MBA program, try grabbing as much experience as you can in terms of learning the knowledge, practicing it once or twice. And so that when you're doing it on your business, you have done it already. And so you're more seasoned as much as you can be. And then again, if it doesn't work out, you can still move forward. I think besides that, it's definitely the network. No matter what, I've built lots of great connections in the MBA program, in the Ross community, and then in Ann Arbor and Michigan as well. And so being able to rely on fellow entrepreneurs, you never know when someone can help you out. If you're having a really rough time in your startup, or you need contacts or connections to look for funding, for example, all these connections that you made during the MBA program or just within the community is going to help you a long way. It's all about the relationships piece too. So I would say being plugged in not only from the entrepreneurial process business side, but also from the relationship side too, and just make as many connections as you can.
Great, thanks. Ankit, we'll move to you next. Tell us any advice you have for people considering the MBA who want to launch a business.
I will echo Natalie's comments on networking. I think it's at the end of the day, whether you are in the corporate world or you're trying to start something of your own, I think networking is one of the biggest reasons why you would go for an MBA. And entrepreneurship is brutal, is hard. So having the right network around you will help. So just try to focus on that. For me personally, interactions with professors back at IESE, trying to brainstorm about Gyandan, about education financing, the problem of education financing helped a lot, because a couple of my professors pointed me to a startup in the LATAM area that was doing exactly the same thing or similar approach. That's when I got into the world of income sharing agreements and so on and so forth. So that network really does play a lot of factor. And I actually even evaluated candidates to hire at Gyandan for a CTO role or for other roles through my MBA network. So that definitely helps a lot. I think I've not really raised funding from IESE, but definitely that network has helped me even from a funding standpoint. And so I think networking is definitely the most important thing. The other thing which I kind of alluded to in terms of from an academic standpoint is stuff like going through entrepreneurship financing courses and stuff like that really helped me personally, in the sense that I didn't have to hire a lawyer, at least for my first few term sheets. Or I mean, it's a good thing to hire a lawyer, but I didn't have to spend extra dollars doing that. that is what gave me my return on MBA immediately, rather than paying money to a lawyer.
Great, thanks. Svitha, how about you? What advice do you have for people considering the MBA?
I think networking is key, like everybody mentioned. I was popular at Babson for doing more outside classroom than being in the classroom. There's tons of opportunities to connect with people from several industries and see how they've built businesses and things like that. Babson particularly was great for me because it made my whole entrepreneurship journey super fun. I used to be out at like the Hult Prize business competitions and other competitions. I also got a chance to pitch my idea to former President Clinton and to Al Gore. So the kind of network that Babson got me was fantastic, and I feel that's something that I'll carry with me all along. And it's that network of your classmates, your professors, that you can go back to anytime, that makes me feel very stable, although entrepreneurship can be brutal sometimes. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And it looks like we're kind of less than 10 minutes to go, so I think this is going to be the last question. Natalie, we'll start with you. And we've already kind of hit upon this quite a bit, but I'm wondering if in a few sentences you can just best describe the entrepreneurial climate at Michigan Ross and Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I would say that they're very invested in helping startups, especially those who want to stay in the community too. But even they have tons of connections on the West Coast. They have treks out there. So I'd say what's great about Michigan is that they're so community oriented and wanting to connect you with people, whether it's the West Coast, the Midwest, etc. So it's a really great place to, again, be in that safe environment and pitch to other people who came from Ross or just who are connected to Michigan in some way, because it's a huge alumni network. And you can always somehow get connected to someone if you ever need help or mentorship. And so I would say, like, definitely consider it in terms of not only are you getting entrepreneurial experience, but then again, that key like networking piece too. You never know where that can go and how that mentorship can grow in the future.
Great. Ankit, let's move to you next. In a few sentences, minute or two, what do you think kind of just defines the entrepreneurial ecosystem at IESE and Barcelona, and some things that you think people might not know about it?
It's entrepreneurial. That is what would define IESE and Barcelona of late. I think in addition to the things I touched upon on the academic side, they have the traditional things that others MBA schools also have these days around Finaves, which is a fund that invests in startups. They even have an option wherein you could work on your own startup in the second year, or even in the break between the first and the second year. That helps a lot. And in the last few years, Barcelona has come up as a hub in Europe. So you get exposure to a lot of startups in the Barcelona area as well, when you could interact with other fellow entrepreneurs. And that leads to a good, I would say, ecosystem when you can exchange ideas and kind of share thoughts. So I think that really summarizes it for me in my mind.
Great. Svitha, we'll move to you next. What is it like at Babson?
So at Babson, a very popular methodology that is used is called the ETA, or the Entrepreneurial Thought in Action. It's basically how you act, learn, and build. And basically helps the students not only to think of an idea, but also to balance it out with action. How do you experiment with it and get creative with like a more deeper understanding of business fundamentals, and how do you grow it to a larger scale and things like that. So the ETA is what defines a lot at Babson College here.
Great. Eric,
Yeah.
last but certainly not least, tell us about UCSD and the program there, and anything you think people might not know about it.
Yeah, and so I think, it's nice because San Diego, is kind of built on entrepreneurship. It was, very much military. It's very where some of the, tech and biotech really has started and grown. And so I think, Rady has an advantage, right? It was built on top of that network, and it was built because there was a gap. People were like, we really need, some entrepreneurship program that can feed all these businesses in pharma and biotech and things like that. So wouldn't say it was cheating, but it was like, the ecosystem was in place, and now, with this school, it's a feeder to a lot of different jobs in that ecosystem, which is great. And I think, from my standpoint, it allowed me to quickly connect with, an environment that, being military and not in the biotech necessarily San Diego community before I started these things, to connect very quickly. And ultimately, we got venture funding for Serafina from, a top 10 venture capital company, Domain Associates, who led the round in San Diego. And so I guess, in summary, it's kind of soup to nuts entrepreneurship, everything from school and getting the education to, starting and growing a business and then getting it VC funded and acquired, kind of exists in the San Diego ecosystem.
Great, thanks. And San Diego is not a bad place to spend a couple of years if you're going to spend a couple of years somewhere. So thanks to all of our panelists. We're at the end of this panel now. We really appreciate you being here and your insights, all super fascinating and super helpful. Take care and stay safe.
Thanks for having us.